Welcome, everybody. I feel so fortunate. We have Georgianne Chapin joining us, and I will give you one of Georgianne's quotes, and it's circumcision cuts through us all. And I can't think of a better quote for the effect of circumcision in the United States, since 1/3 of the American population has had their genitals cut. It certainly affects us all. Georgianne Chapin is the founding executive director of Intact America. Georgianne has fought for humane, cost-effective, high-quality healthcare for 4 decades, first in community health and then as an executive officer for a nonprofit Medicaid health plan and the Hudson Center for Health Equality and Quality. In 2008, together with a group of other intactivists, she co-founded Intact America. An intuitive intactivist since her childhood, Georgianne holds an undergraduate degree in anthropology from Barnard College, a master's degree in social medical sciences from Columbia University, and a law degree from Pace University School of Law. In February 2024, she published her first book, The Penis Business, a social activist memoir. Georgianne lives near Woodstock in New York's Hudson Valley, and she has one son, Ernesto Escavera, who works as a glass blower. And welcome, Georgianne Chapin. I feel so fortunate to share your wisdom with our viewers today. And I'm going to let you go because you have 4 decades to fill us in on in the next hour or
No,
so.
I'll spare you the 4 decades.
So
Let's talk about what's happening today with our cause with trying to end genital cutting of all children. And I'll talk about how I came here as we narrow in on issues, but I really want to thank you so much, Dwayne, for having me on your show. It's an honor. I love being able to reach more people than the one person sitting across from me. So you have
yeah,
growing audience, and it's just a pleasure. So
thank you. We post across all the platforms, and we share to also several places on Facebook. You will be seen, ma'am. Let's talk about what you have coming up with Intact America, and which is the next thing is Foreskin Day. And
yeah.
that's coming up real soon on April 4th. So tell our viewers about that and how they can even participate, since they can do a video of themselves and add to the fun of the fantastic features of the phantasmagorical foreskin.
Yes, Intact America founded this holiday, Foreskin Day, on the fourth day of the fourth month of the year.
Oh,
So this
four. I'll say, okay, go
four,
ahead.
four, four,
Yeah.
and this year will be our fourth Foreskin Day. You
Hmm.
can read about Intact America on our website. You can see all of our social media pages. Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on YouTube, we have Reddit. Look at any of the social media platforms and learn about Intact America and Foreskin Day. IntactAmerica.org is our main website. You can go on foreskin.day to find out about the upcoming celebration. You can send a short video and we'll be showing them on Foreskin Day. It's a combination of recorded and live content. So Intact America's our goal is to tackling the circumcision industry, which is huge business in the United States, and it's supported by very powerful social and cultural and economic interests. The intactivist movement has been around for probably about 50 years and is growing considerably and making progress, but we have enormous pushback, so that's why it takes all of us to really work against this abuse of children. And I'm very, very proud to be doing it and sorry that it's such a heavy lift.
It's like the reason it's not discussed so much is because the United States is a sex phobic culture, and we don't talk about sex. And I think that biggest thing is that circumcision is hidden behind the men's pants. It's hidden by shame, and it's hidden by denial, and it's hidden by the closed doors with the baby screaming down the hallway that no one ever hears. And I think one of the best things you got coming up is getting the foreskin out of the closet.
That's right. That was our theme for Pride one year, and it's an evergreen theme because you're right. There's an enormous, it's not just an ignorance about the foreskin. I call it banished knowledge. It's so thoroughly off of most people's lists of things they know about. I mean, Banished knowledge is a term that was created by Alice Miller, who was a child psychologist. She was German and Swiss, and she's deceased now, but she used the term banished knowledge to refer to abusive practices inflicted on children from all kinds of abuse. And her contention was that Western culture treats children terribly, and that we bank on, it's not a topic that anybody wants to talk about. The people who inflict harm don't want to own up to it, and the people who are harmed are often harmed by the people who love them the most and who they love the most. So no one is really held accountable for this harm. And Alice Miller talks about all kinds of abusive child rearing practices, including even violent treatment and non-physical things. And of course, nobody circumcising a child is doing it as a form of physical punishment, but it is a physical violence. So she talks about how as long as the perpetrators are not able to take responsibility for what they've done, and the victims are shamed or embarrassed or fearful of blaming the perpetrators, that this is a cycle that will continue across the generations. And I think that the banished knowledge concept is particularly useful here because it permeates the banishment of knowledge, the lack of knowledge, the failure to talk about it, the failure to share any information about it and any knowledge about it permeates our entire medical profession. So an American urologist knows less about the functions of the male foreskin and its role in sexuality and how to treat any kinds of problems that might ever arise, or how to even recognize problems, anything with a foreskin in American medicine is viewed as something to cut off, and that's about it. So as long as we have that situation, intactivists know more about the foreskin than physicians in this country. And we do know a lot, those of us who've been at it, but we're not physicians, we're not clinicians, but we actually know more than the average doctor. And of course, we know that the foreskin shouldn't be cut off. So we have a very strangely secretive attitude toward the male body because we just as a culture don't know.
I thought it was interesting so to expand on the banished knowledge, and I'm sure you can talk more about this, but the foreskin is not even in the medical textbooks. Imagine this, a human organ is not even in the medical textbooks. And I know you're aware of this, but can you expand on that?
Well, it's like it's hard to expand upon because you're right, it's not there, right? I have in back of me here in my office the wall chart of human anatomy, and it's from 2012. It's National Library of Medicine. It's not available anymore, and it's a very large format series of very, very finely done drawings of the human anatomy, and it has the various bodily systems on it with big full color charts. And the male reproductive system takes up one, very large plate, actually two in this compilation, and it's exquisitely detailed. Every part of the internal reproductive organs and the external body parts. And so you see the testicles, and you see the penis, and you see the glans penis, and there's no foreskin. It's not even on the label. It's not there. The drawing of the penis, the drawings of the penis are all without the foreskin. They're all circumcised penises. And this is only 14 years ago that this thing came out. It explains why this is thanks to this movement and thanks to advances in being able to talk about this. And also, I think, thanks to our openness to Well, thanks to immigrant populations in this country who do have foreskins, and thanks to international travel by women and men, and thanks to the gay rights movement, where gay men will talk about penises in a way that has not been done for many, for, for decades. Um, we have more knowledge, but this chart that I have that's only 14 years old, and the absence of the foreskin from anatomy textbooks really explains the experience that I used to have very frequently and thankfully don't have as often, where people will say to me, a man will say to me, "You're not going to believe this, but," and I've heard everything, and so I'm pretty sure when someone says that to me that they're going to tell me something that I will have heard before. But this, "You're not going to believe me, but I never knew I was circumcised till I was 38 years old. I didn't even know what it meant." Or, "You're not going to believe this, but I thought that my penis, the ring around my penis was just the way it was supposed to be." And then I heard something about circumcision and about a scar. And I said, I don't have a scar." And then the next time I went to the bathroom, I looked down and I realized that what I thought was just the way it was actually a scar where something had been cut off.
Interesting you say that, because I personally didn't realize that I was circumcised until I was 55 years old. How would I know? How would I know what an intact penis was supposed to look like? I've never saw another man's penis before. But I always wondered why the skin changed color halfway down the shaft of my penis. And so, gentlemen, that is where your circumcision scar is. That's the lighter colored skin is the inner mucosal layer, and then there's a scar line, and then there's your outer shaft skin. So when you look down and you see where the skin color changes, that's where your scar line
That's
is, and
where
that's
you
where
were
the
surgically mutilated.
right.
Correct.
So even
Right.
even even us who've realized late in life and is new to this realization, we can bring awareness. You can use your voice and tell the people about it. And I think, and to keep going with this banished knowledge, I think that people don't realize that it's like, people think we live in a genital cutting culture, with 35% of the United States population being genitally cut, all of them being men. But actually, we live in a genital harvesting culture, and the foreskin is sold to the biotech and cosmetic industries out the back door of the hospital. So your child's foreskin, if you had your son circumcised, or your own foreskin, if you were circumcised, may have been sold and used in products. You want to talk about that, Georgianne?
Yeah, this is something that we don't know nearly enough about because it's fairly secretive industry. It's not every foreskin because if your child's born in a community hospital or circumcised in a doctor's office, those facilities are not set up to sell the foreskins or to furnish them to the industry that processes them and uses them for either artificial skin or cosmetics. But it's a huge business. Uh, it's a type of tissue piracy because the child, of course, did not agree to have his foreskin, his bodily tissue used. But it would take some kind of a very committed investigative reporter to really dig this up. A number of us have tried to find out more about this, and I don't think we have any good data on how this is actually carried out. We also do know, though, that that the industry is now harvesting foreskins from babies outside the country. South Korea's one source. The Sandra Bullock, who was on the Ellen DeGeneres show a few years ago, talking about her penis facial, when Ellen pressed her on what it was, she said it's I forget whether she said skin, but it's something taken from a very small boy in from Korea or
She called
something
it an
like that.
extraction. She called it an extraction.
this makes us aware that they're going outside the country. And then, of course, um, circumcision is being spread as an was never practiced among infants in any African countries. It was a rite of passage, usually for older children. And now we know that thanks to the unethical campaign to circumcise Black African men as a supposed way of preventing the transmission of HIV, which doesn't work, that now they've taken the practice down to younger and younger boys. And so now infants are getting circumcised. I have no idea if they're harvesting the foreskins for industry. We just don't know. But yes, this is going on. In general, in the US, the more general experience is that the foreskin is lopped off and thrown in the garbage. And the child is left to suffer from that surgery and its consequences, which can range from normal, which means living without that body part and the pleasure that it confers, to disastrous, which can be terrible disfigurement, dysfunction, pain, lifelong pain, complete lack of sensation or limited sensation, and terribly, I mentioned disfigurement, terribly ugly cosmetic results. And those things are denied by the medical sector as being significant. You know, they downplay what they call complications, but the complications are frequent and often severe.
Well, and I'm one of those. So it's like I live with the lifelong dysfunction of what's left of my penis and also lifelong pain from the surgery that I have received. My circumcision was severe, although it still looks like a penis. I describe it as a tree with all the branches being cut off. It's like, yeah, there's a stump there. I personally think that that's my opinion, but of my circumciser, he must have enjoyed the process, done it so severely.
Isn't that tragic?
And I also had to have revision surgery. So I had medial stenosis with a closing of the urethra. So the urethra is not supposed to be exposed. Foreskin's supposed to cover the urethra. So there's supposed to be a closure over the urethra. The urethra is not supposed to be exposed to abrasion and dirt and with the outside world. So when that structure is amputated, it leaves the urethra exposed and it closes and it's called medial stenosis.
Yeah, I talk about that in my book. My first awareness of circumcision was when my brother was born, when I was 10 years old, and he came home from the hospital, and I noticed when my mother changed his diaper that his penis had blood on it and was oozing a little blood. I don't remember asking. I probably did, but I remember thinking, why would he have a bleeding penis? And then he had to be taken back to the doctor because his meatus, as you said, had closed up and had to be reopened with a scalpel while my mother held him. I started speaking out about circumcision and asking about it and hating it from when I was about that age, about 10 years old. It just didn't make any sense to me that all baby boys were born needing surgery. It just made no sense. And then I found out much, much later, actually, after I became involved in the movement against infant circumcision, that meatal stenosis really only occurs in circumcised males. It's not something that intact men ever experience. I mean, maybe there'll be a very, very, very rare case. I'm not sure. I've never heard of one, but and there are different explanations for it, and I don't think we really know why. I have my preferred explanation. People said that it has to do with the diaper or the underwear rubbing against the tip of the penis and causing the meatus to become inflamed and then hardened. And the alternate explanation is that, which makes more sense to me, is that by severing the foreskin, it reroutes all of the circulatory functions in the penis. So the blood flow is cut off and has to be rerouted, and that can eventually result drying up or the atrophy of the other parts of the penis. And so those are the two explanations, and I don't think it's been shown really which one is more. Both could be true, I suppose.
Yeah, but it's interesting you say that. I never thought about the rerouting of the
Yeah, the blood
circulatory system,
vessels.
but
Yeah,
of course,
yeah.
yeah,
I think, yeah. Anyway, I don't want to go into my
yeah.
thinking on it because I don't know what the reason is, but I
Well,
do know that it only occurs in circumcised males.
well, the only knowledge we have, of course, is the research that's paid for, and so follow the money. And it's like, who does the research? And it's like, since we do live in a genital cutting culture, in reality, we live in a genital harvesting culture. That the only research that gets paid for is the one that's going to support this $6 billion a year industry.
Right. Yeah. The only thing that we should not forget about, and this is a random thing I'm putting out here, is not only is there the business of cutting off the foreskin and selling the foreskins if the baby's born in a setting where that can occur, but there's the follow-up business, which is all the repairs, right? So I have heard figures varying from half to two-thirds of the income of urologists. Well, I don't want to say the income, the work of urologists. I don't know income. But half to two-thirds of what urologists do is repair circumcisions. So these would be cosmetic repairs, functional repairs, and that's that's just really an astonishing
That's
number.
great.
So when you hear there aren't complications are rare, but that urologists are basically living off the complications, that's really astonishing.
Yeah, I'm having to pause a second because I didn't realize. I mean, in my personal opinion, circumcision has a 100% complication rate, and
Of course.
I've heard 20%, but I now you're telling me
Well,
between,
no, it might be, but
yeah,
then that would become there are a lot more circumcised men than there are urologists. There are a lot more circumcisers than there are urologists dealing with it. So it could be
wow.
even lower than that, but it's big business for urology, is the
Yeah.
point.
Well, and
Right.
it's the simple fact that we're having to do revision surgery for an elective cosmetic surgery in the first place. And just to reiterate, so the about the foreskin harvesting, and it's like anybody watching today, you can type into any search engine, you type in neonatal foreskin fibroblasts and click shopping, and you can have those foreskin extractions sent to your front door as we speak. And
Right, for a couple $100, right? I don't know what you're gonna do with them, but yeah, right.
well, I'm just so people know that it is
Yeah,
in fact happening.
yeah, you can find it on
And
Amazon.
I have found a couple of websites that you can actually buy the infant foreskins. It's out there. Um, so yeah, so we're here making intact penis part of the bodily autonomy conversation. Let's talk about what you else you have. So honoring men's voices in conversation about healing from trauma and grief and creating skin in the game. And skin in the game, or is it's still active, or are you
Oh,
doing?
yes, I'll tell you about all of that. Skin in the Game is a campaign that we created about 4 years ago. We did some photo shoots in Atlanta and in Dallas, and Intact America is conducting a photo shoot and interviews of men. We didn't say what it was about. But we did give the name of the organization. Call us, get in touch with us and we'll tell you about it. And we also had a lot of people who were in the movement, people who we knew, board members of Intact America, ourselves. So we had a group of people to start with, but the majority of the people who were photographed and whose stories we got for Skin in the Game, this campaign, were from the outside world, people we'd never met before. And so people would call up, and Kelly Floyd, who was working for us at the time, would explain to them what it was about and what we were about. And I don't know what number of people said, no, no, thanks, I'm not interested, thank you. And a remarkable number of people said, oh, wow, yeah, I'll come. Yeah, I'll talk about that. And some of them said, oh, I never really thought about it, but sure. People started coming in, and it was like this transformative for everybody, for me, for everybody, the people who came, coming in and being and having someone talking to them about something they'd probably never talked about before. And so men who said, I've never been able to tell anybody my story. We had two cousins that came in, and both of them, they'd been born within a year of each other, and both had been circumcised by the same doctor, and both of them had bad outcomes. Mothers who had been pressured into circumcising their sons, and their sons had terribly disfigured penises as a result. Lots of just regular people who didn't have particularly terribly visibly traumatic injuries, but when prompted or given the opportunity to talk about it, became extremely emotional. I'm 74, and I came of age in the 60s, and early 70s. It reminded me of encounter groups, that where people would get together and talk about things they never talked about it, to anybody before. And there we all were sitting around this big, huge studio in Atlanta. This was where it first was. And we had it catered, so there was food there all the time, and there were comfortable places to sit. And we told people it would take about half an hour to 45 minutes. We asked them to wear jeans. We gave them a black t-shirt. We said there'd be food. We said it would be about 45 minutes. People would come and they'd stay for 3 hours, 4 hours. It was the first time they'd ever had to process this. And the tagline that you mentioned, circumcision cuts through us all, was actually, I can't take total credit for it, because Kevin Garrett, who was the photographer, and I came up with that. And then we were going to call that was going to be the name of the campaign. And it hit me one morning when we were preparing everything that we should give it a zingier name. And I said, why don't we call it Skin in the Game? And that name stuck. And Kevin, and then we made Circumcision Cuts Through Us All as the tagline. So we have a website, skininthegame.org. You can see pictures, you can see photographs of the people who came to the photo shoots and their stories, and beautiful, beautiful photographs. So it's an ongoing campaign that we use in different ways. Last year, 2025, we had the inaugural Skin in the Game Award, which we presented to actor Alan Cumming, and we had a gala in New York City. It was a fundraiser for Intact America, and we are planning something else probably for either this coming year or 2028. It's an enormous undertaking. But in the meantime, the website is alive. We're adding material to it. We add interviews to it, and we'll probably do another photo shoot in the meantime.
Yeah, tell me where that is. I'll show up.
Yeah, well, definitely. It's quite a big undertaking and quite a big investment to do that. But the skininthegame.org will tell you. Well, you should look at it, and your audience, I hope, will look at it, because it's really, really a beautifully done campaign.
So skininthegame.org, that's a separate website?
Skininthegame.org is a separate website. And we talked about Foreskin Day at the beginning of this conversation. Mm-hmm. So our theme for Foreskin Day this year is Skin in the Game. So the participation that we've said, I told you I would I would check it out. It's we're using the Memento, MEMENTO video platform, and we're going to create a community montage that will air during the Foreskin Day program on April 4th. If you want to participate, okay, if your viewers want to participate, write to us, info@intactamerica.org, and we'll tell you how to participate.
There you go.
info@intactamerica.org.
I appreciate that. I appreciate you honoring the men's voices about their healing and trauma, and giving a platform to victims,
this is what our movement depends on. We depend on people talking about the unmentionable, right? Last year's theme for Foreskin Day was Say the F Word, and the F word, of course, being foreskin. We're trying to get people we're normalizing these conversations, right? You and I've talked about this, like, what do you need to do to speak out against circumcision? And we're trying to normalize the conversation, so that anybody who has an opinion can speak out. You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be think about it this way. The urologists don't know anything about the foreskin. So what? You think that you don't have the right to talk about your feelings and your observations and your knowledge that chopping off part of a baby's penis is wrong? You don't need a lot of facts to be able to talk about that. So that's why everything we do is to encourage conversations and breaking the ice for yourself and being able to talk about this. You've obviously done this yourself. And the more and more people who can do this, the less mystification, right, of the topic there will be.
Mystifying, right? Banished knowledge. It's mystifying because it's banished knowledge.
The other thing that we're going to do is another survey. I think Tactic America has done surveys over the years. We've done surveys on public attitudes toward circumcision, toward the desirability of keeping boys intact, the percentage of the population, and we use national databases, paid surveys, professional surveys. This is not something we put on Intact America's Facebook page. We use objective sampling from reputable surveying companies. And the percentage of the public that favors keeping boys intact has more than doubled since 2012 when we did the first survey. We've done surveys on solicitation, moms who are pressured to cut their sons. We found that the average number of asks for moms who are giving birth for pregnant and immediately perinatal mothers is 8.4 times. They're asked, if you sure you don't want to do this, it's better if you do. Why'd you say no? He'll thank you later. 8.4
I'm
times.
I'm not thankful for my circumcision. Sorry, go ahead.
Correct. I've never heard, well, maybe I've heard a couple of people say with tragedy in their eyes how they're glad they're circumcised. And, I just say, well, I'm happy for you that you're glad you're circumcised, but it doesn't ring true to me. We did a solicitation survey. We did a survey on forcible foreskin retraction. We found that, and we asked moms about that boys under 5, we did that survey about 3 years ago, born in the prior 3 or 4 years, more than 40% had their foreskins forcibly retracted. Intact boys had their foreskins forcibly retracted. We did that survey. And we have a survey coming up on where there's a lot of new material out there about the circumcision rate falling. And I know, having worked for an insurance company for many years, I know a little something about health care data and procedure data, and the statistics that show the foreskin rate below 50% are very poor methodology, leave out circumcisions not done in the hospital in the first couple of days after birth. And we know circumcisions are migrating into pediatricians' offices. We know that, so to just capture that immediate postpartum period is not an accurate way to measure it. So we're going to be asking moms themselves, because they're the ones that know. And we are in the process of finalizing the survey instrument. We're going to be using cloud research, and we're going to do something new. We're going to include Canada in the survey because we're Intact America, right? And we know that circumcision in Canada shares a history with circumcision in the United States. And we know that in certain provinces, it's still very common. And we decided we're going to survey the Canadian population also.
Thank you for clearing that up, because I've heard that too, and the 50% number. And I want to be clear with our viewers that it's, even if the circumcision rate was only 50%, that's 1 million healthy newborn infants a year having genital cutting. But now you're clearing it up for me. The 50% number only represents the in-hospital neonatal cutting.
Right, and not all of them. It represents the ones that showed up on a hospital bill. So if it was part of a bundle of services, it's likely not to have shown up. It's because often certain services there's the newborn package, right? And it costs the same for boys and for girls. If the mother pays cash for the circumcision, it's likely not to show up. And it's those data are collected state by state, and the states have different systems for collecting this data. And some of them collect every hospitalization, whether it's insured or not, but mostly not. Mostly it's insurance billing, and that includes Medicaid billing. So there's no default that would overstate the number of circumcisions. It all goes to understate it. And I think it's important to talk about this for a couple of reasons. In any interpretation of data, and we're not trained, I mean, there's no high school class on how to read statistics, right? In the newspaper, when you see something about this is, the fifth coldest winter in X amount of time, to say what is the source of that information, or percentages. People don't really know how to interpret percentages. So you have a 50% higher chance of having a stroke if you eat ice cream than if you don't, say, that doesn't mean you have a 50% chance of having a stroke if you eat ice cream. It means you have this much more chance of having a stroke than people who don't eat ice cream. Very hard to grasp those concepts. Well, with circumcision data, there are several sources of bias in reading these statistics, right? For intactivists, it's kind of thrilling, to see that circumcision rate has gone down. Keeping in mind what you said, it's still a lot of babies, right? But because we'd like to be able to take credit for the work that we've been doing all these years. And I'm right there. I'd love to be able to think that our movement has made this huge difference. One thing is that just because the baby goes home intact doesn't mean he stays intact. As I said, 40% of babies get forcibly retracted, and many of those lead to circumcisions, right? But it's understandable still to say, wow, this is good. This is good. It used to be 70% or 80%. Now it's, 50. But it's not. The other side, however, there's another agenda operating, which is the guy who was the last author on that paper that came out that said that circumcision is below 50%. His name is Aaron Tobian, Tobian, is a longtime promoter of the circumcision campaigns in sub-Saharan Africa. And he's also written papers about the circumcision rate declines in the US. And this is fascinating. He says, to the rate that's prevalent in Europe, which is very, very low, below 10%, we're going to see an explosion in medical costs among all those intact boys. Basically, what he's saying is intact boys are unhealthier than circumcised boys, and there is absolutely no evidence for that. So the people who put that paper out have a hidden agenda, which is to scare parents, really, into thinking that, and to scare doctors and to scare even insurance companies that might be wanting to not fund circumcision into believing that their costs are going to shoot up as all these boys are out there with their dangerous foreskins. And there is, not only is there no evidence of that, the evidence is all to the contrary. Europe has far lower medical expenses per capita than the United States does. States that have lower circumcision rates, they don't have like epidemic urinary tract infections. Countries that have circumcised populations do not have less HIV than countries that have intact populations. So these are kind of tropes that are perpetrated with absolutely no evidence. But because there's so much bias and so much fear instilled in the population, you can see a mother going, oh my God, if I keep my child intact, is he going to have, an infection every week? Is he going to get AIDS? Is he going to, right? The only way you can get AIDS is to get exposed to AIDS. And the only way not to get exposed to AIDS is to save sex and not shoot drugs. So there are agendas working on both sides. People who want to believe the bogus rates and people who are putting the bogus rates out there with messages of increased medical costs. And all of it is corrupt. And we got to pull back and we have to think, what are the agendas here? what does this mean? What are the underlying messages? I'm writing a paper about it now, and I'm having a trouble keeping it concise. But I hope to have it out soon, right around the time that we start the survey.
Yes.
It's very important.
That's one of the great resources of Intact America is the surveys you have done, and you've mentioned the 8 times asked. That's high pressure sales in anybody's definition. It's, I mean,
right.
Selling a car. If you, oh, do you want to buy this car? And they ask you 8 times. That's high pressure sales.
You can find all of this information on the intactamerica.org website, and also dozens of fascinating articles with all, I mean, you could drop your video games and read the Intact America blog posts because they're all fascinating. And we put up new blog pieces constantly, and they go back, 18 years, 15 years. So if you are interested, you'll find something wonderful to read. Oh, so we're also on YouTube. We have a great YouTube page. So yeah, this stuff, you can find it all on our website and on our social media.
Yeah, I mean, it's if you only have 30 minutes this week, go to the Intact America website and check out some of these surveys. And it's, don't believe us.
Sign up for a mailing list.
Yep.
So you'll get our newsletter. And if you use Facebook, go on Facebook and Instagram and sign up to follow our pages, Reddit. And you'll be instantly part of a community of Intactivists if you sign up for our on our social media platforms.
And Intactivists. Yeah, some of our viewers may not even know what an Intactivist is. So it's an Intactivist, like so an intact person and then an activist. So we use the term Intactivist.
Right. Yes, it's a term. It was a coined phrase, and back in the old days, the press would put quotes around it or make fun of the term, and now it's really, as new terms come into the lexicon all the time, and it's pretty much it's there now.
Yeah, well, it's not just boys in the United States that are being cut now, and it's girls in the United States, and so that people may not realize that it's so female genital mutilation ban or law came into effect in 1996 and was soon struck down in 2011. And just so everyone knows, it was struck down because it was unconstitutional, because it was gender specific. And just so everybody knows that doctor that was charged in that case is still practicing today, still has her license today.
It was actually struck down on a technical ground, which is that states, not the federal government, regulate medical practices.
Okay.
Medical practice. That's why it was struck down. Now, many states have laws against female genital cutting, so it's still not tolerated. It's not openly practiced, but we used to, practice it, never to the prevalence of male circumcision, but it is illegal in most states to cut girls.
Okay. Thank you for that. So advocacy. So Intact America offers both advocacy resources and support. The Do No Harm report and the Therapy Partners Network, is that still active?
Oh my goodness. Yes, we have a new season or session starting today. We have a therapy program. It's group therapy online. We have 3 licensed clinical psychologists who have specialized in circumcision, in treating men who have been harmed by circumcision. And they're wonderful. Actually, 2 of the 3 we talked about Canada, 2 of the 3 are Canadians, and one is an American, an immigrant from Russia, actually. And they trade off, and we have about 10 people in this current group that's starting. And we've done a survey among participants, and people started out kind of all over the place. I don't sit in on these meetings are confidential, and people have started out very ambivalent. They want to do it, but it's scary, and they've not talked about it. And we've had overwhelming success with it. And we just started a new group. To join, you have to be a monthly donor to Intact America in any amount. I mean, you can donate $5 a month, but we want that commitment. And you have to commit to coming to all the sessions. And so we're just starting the second season. I see this program growing a lot. Um, we're limited only by resources, right? I mean, by money and staff. We could do so much more.
It
So
sounds
we've
like perfect
decided to
timing.
focus. Sorry?
Sounds like perfect timing. If you're just starting a session now, perfect timing for our viewers. They can join.
Probably can't get into this one. This once it starts, it's a closed group of
I follow
people,
you.
but there'll be another one.
Okay.
So and you can go in and read about it. Yeah, so that's
So what do you think is the most effective entry? So, we spoke at the beginning of the our podcast about how if even if you're thinking about circumcision or the harms of circumcision, you're qualified to talk about it. What is an effective entry point? Is it bodily autonomy, child protection, sexual function, trauma, informed consent, or simply respect for nature? So, every mammal on earth is born with a foreskin, and somehow we believe that the human male is the only animal on earth in need of immediate genital modification. How do we start this conversation with people?
well, any and all of the above, but I would say that um, the conversation could be started, I mean, as we say, sometimes it just comes up, right?
Mm.
Maybe somebody makes a circumcision joke. Maybe somebody says, "Oh, um, my wife is pregnant," or "I'm pregnant, and I don't know what to do about circumcision." I mean, it can come up in any way. Or if, you're talking to a close friend and you say, I've never talked to you about this, but, I've become involved in this movement. I think it's more, um, I think it's more spontaneous it can be more spontaneous than we realize. And then the most important thing, as with any conversation, is that it's a two-way street, right? So you're sharing your perspective and you're figuring out as you're talking and you're listening and seeing where the other person is coming from. It sometimes it'll start out as an argument, right? Somebody will say, "Oh, like you say, I'm glad I'm circumcised," or "Oh man, I would never not circumcise my son," or "Oh, I think intact penis is gross," something like that. And then you could say, "Well, really, you really think that? Why do you think that? What about, do you think the same thing about girls, who have all
Girls
their
have
body
lots of
parts?"
folds. Girls have lots of folds. We're just
Yeah.
cutting their
So
parts off.
anything that you think of is relevant. The issue is more the tone and your confidence. So many people have said to me, "I don't feel qualified to talk about this. I feel like I have to master all the science." This is not a scientific discussion. This is a common sense discussion, right? This is a child protection discussion. This is an ethics discussion. It's not ethical to cut a normal body part off of a baby. This is like I said, common sense. This is a respect for nature, respect for autonomy, bodily autonomy discussion. You don't have to have, because the person who's arguing with you doesn't know a damn thing, right?
Mm.
They don't know what the circumcision rate is. They don't know what anything about cancer of the penis, that it's only 1 in 100,000 men are ever going to have cancer of the penis. 1 in 8 women are going to have cancer of the penis. I mean, cancer. 1 in 8 women are going to have breast cancer. They don't know any of that. They're just reacting and defending against what the status quo is. And you can diffuse that by saying something like, "Well, I never realized it, but cancer of the penis," when they say, "Oh, but cancer of the penis," you say, "I never realized it actually, but I looked it up, and cancer of the penis only happens to 1 in 100,000 men." Or you can say, "Well, cancer of the penis only happens to old guys." Or you can say, "Well, the American Cancer Society says it's not, circumcision doesn't prevent cancer of the penis." There are touch points for all of that. Let's say you don't know that. That's okay. You can say, "Yeah, but there's nothing wrong with the baby. Why are you going to cut off a body part? Or you can say, what body part would you be okay with having cut off? You cut off your fingers, your fingertips, and then you'd never get it, or your toes, you'd never get any ingrown toenails. I mean, all these common sense things that come to you that you think this couldn't possibly be persuasive. It is. And then you're just having a conversation, right? And believe me, I've learned all of this over the years. I mean, I used to get very, because I'm very, into logic and um, I used to get hyper logical and hyper intellectual. And I would say, I would talk about human rights violation. That's a very abstract term to a lot of people, right? So I would say, well, we don't have, I don't know that we would, why do you think we have the right to cut a body part off of a baby, a normal body part off of a baby? Now, that's you're saying that it's an ethical and human rights violation. That's what you're saying, but you're putting it in real people terms, right? Um, you could talk about pain. If someone says, "Oh, babies don't feel pain," you say, "Really?" Ask any mom. When you see that the zipper from the onesie is cutting into the kid's, neck, and they're screaming, you're going to tell me the kid doesn't feel pain? When somebody says, "Oh, babies," they'll forget about it. They'll forget about it. I mean, that same logic would be used to exonerate a rapist. The woman was unconscious. She didn't even realize what was happening to her. So no harm, no foul,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah,
Like,
she doesn't remember.
yeah, she doesn't remember. We can't do that. And then also we know because it is in the water now. We do know as a culture way more than we did before about babies do remember. And trauma is laid down in the earliest days of life. We know that children who are relinquished feel that broken bond. We know that infants depend on the protection of their mothers, right? So for a newborn baby to be handed off to a stranger and then, undergo excruciating pain, that gets laid down as there's a book by Bessel Vanderkolk that called The Body Keeps the Score. Early traumas are definite. That's what the adverse childhood experiences inventory is about. That painful and traumatic child experiences impact people throughout their lives and predispose them to not just to psychological problems, but to physical problems. So we are inflicting a harm on a baby that will be have consequences forever. And I say we're inflicting a harm on the mom too. Um, Mothers are exquisitely sensitive about feeling that they're doing about being a good parent. And I've talked to hundreds more women who are still brought to tears by the thought that they um, allowed their babies to be circumcised, often against their instinct.
Mhm. Yes,
Uh,
well, it's in everyone's instinct to protect a child.
right.
Yes, for
And
sure.
that instinct, that solicitation we talked about, um, that is engineered to sabotage the instinct, to subvert the instinct of a
Mhm. Well,
protective.
it's giving your power away to the people in the white coat. Yeah.
Correct. Right.
So they're been educated and they should know. The mother believes that they know the best way to take care of their child, but in reality, that doctor doesn't even know what a foreskin is. He knows how to cut it off. He doesn't know the
Right.
functions of
Well,
it. He
that
doesn't know what it
Yeah,
is.
well, also the baby, I mean, the doctor at that point, a machine. I mean, the doctor doesn't owe a duty to care for that child. I mean, they come in and they're gone, and the mother is left with the damage that was done, and the mother and the baby are left with the damage. The family is left
Mhm.
with the damage that was
Well,
done.
and I think it's important to point out that the pain doesn't stop at the circumcision surgery. So at every diaper change, the
Yes,
caregiver is instructed to apply ointment to
And
this
to pull
fresh wound.
and to manipulate the tissue that's left so that it doesn't, create adhesions. And yeah, it's a when we get to those discussions, you're really talking about a brutal, yeah, that's how I feel. You're talking about the brutality of it, the violence of it. Um, and and people are very distant from that. They do
Think
not.
about what you just said, that parent or caregiver is instructed to manipulate the sex organ of their infant,
Right, right. And they're instructed to do that in
their
a
mutilated infant.
circumcised baby and also in an intact baby. If it, but mothers are told if you don't pull the foreskin back every day, baby's gonna have infections. I mean, infections are created by messing with the penis. You don't go putting your fingers inside of the mouth, of a baby. You don't go putting your, you know,
For our viewers, the foreskin is adhered to the head of the penis at birth.
yes,
So think
yeah,
about like how a kitten is born with its eyes closed.
right,
So they're undeveloped. So the eyeballs are undeveloped. Same thing with the male sex organ is undeveloped. So
right.
it's covered in this sheath
The
of a
tissue
foreskin.
that bonds the foreskin to the glans penis, the head of the penis, is the same as the tissue that keeps your nail attached to the nail bed. So to circumcise a baby, you have to pry that tissue apart, and that creates a huge wound, which remain. And then you sever the foreskin, and that baby goes home with that wound.
Right. So
So
when
yeah, the
forcibly,
violence of it is really terrible. And actually, these videos used to be available online, and they're not anymore. And I think that partly that was because of all of the rampant child porn. But it's also very convenient for the medical profession for people not to be able to see the violence of a circumcision
mhm.
and see that screen. And the sound has been suppressed on the few videos you can find, like some of the hospital websites or medical center websites you can see part of a circumcision being done, but the screams are all blocked
Well,
out.
and so it took me, honestly, it took me years before I was able to sit through a whole circumcision video listening to the screams of that child. And those videos are available and if are available on bloodstainedmen.com. If you go to learn more, there's videos available if you have the courage to
Right.
watch
I
an
can't,
actual
I can't
circumcision.
watch them. Yeah. Right.
So we'll go back to it. So Georgianne, you and I could go on forever about this. Because
Yes.
there's so many like
I am going on forever.
what
I have been doing this for so long, and oh my goodness, I think that, that's a good point, Dwayne, because it's really important to tell people it's natural when you first get into this and you first start talking about it to think that if I can just say things the right way, it's going to work and people will stop circumcising their children, and it's so obvious that this is a terrible thing that we are doing to children. But we have to keep in mind that there's an enormous, circumcision in our culture is status quo, and there's an enormous machine out there perpetrating the status, perpetuating the status
a
quo. And
$6 billion machine.
yeah, and so it's not, you have to measure your success by the conversations you're having and by the small policy changes you might see. For example, if you can get hospitals to not ask, so much, it's not going to change overnight. It's too powerful, and the forces that are pushing it are too great. So all we can do is talk about it and bring it into the mainstream and keep on pressing. If we think about other human rights issues and how there's a constant struggle to keep the gains that we've made. And this is going to be no different. But that's not a reason to stop. It's not a reason to stop talking about it. It's not a reason to give up. It's not a reason to despair. Um, it's a reason to keep looking for ways to be effective. Surround yourself with people who believe in the issue the same way you do, because otherwise it's too stressful to be around people who are fighting you on it. And and just keep normalizing the conversation, spreading the word.
Absolutely. And this has been something that's been going on in the human race for thousands of years. And just to bring awareness. And for me, and it's like save one. That's my personal mission. And if I could save one, and I know I've at least saved one, and that's every time I make a podcast or do a short video or have a guest on the with me that it thinks the same way. And it's like save one.
Save one and encourage the parents of that one you saved to save one, right?
Mhm.
Right? Um, to talk about it and spread the word, and presumably they're going to feel good about what they did and of a newborn baby.
Thank you. Uh-oh. I'm
Thank you
losing.
so much for thank you so much for having me on, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. And for your listeners, your viewers, intactamerica.org is our website. I'm Georgianne Chapin. You can reach me at gchapin at
Banner
intactamerica.org.
book.
Read my book, This Penis Business, um, and check out all of our social media, and just keep informing yourself. It's a fascinating topic. It never gets boring. It does get stressful, but it never gets boring. And together we'll make a difference.
Thank you, Georgianne. It's wonderful to have you with me, with us, and to share your knowledge and all your experiences. And I can't think of a better person to help us do that.
Well,
And
thanks for the experiance. Okay.
have a great day.
You too. Bye bye.
All right.